Hello and welcome to Glasgow Love CU. And just before we get started, just got a bit of housekeeping. We have a team of very dedicated and knowledgeable and committed volunteers, but it's been a tough year for everyone, so we decided just to take a break for the summer, and it will be back with another live stream on the 13th of September. So we're looking forward to that. And this evening we've got Claudia Delpero, who's the founder of Europe Street News. Claudia is a journalist specialising in EU and international affairs. She has 20 years of experience in media and public affairs across Europe, China and Africa. Originally, she's from Turin. Claudia worked as a journalist in Italy and a press officer at the European Parliament in Brussels. She was head of communications at the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Brussels and Beijing before moving to London, where she runs Europe Street News. And this evening we've got Bernd, who'll be helping on the IT side, and we've got Paul, who'll be taking your questions on social media. So if you have any questions, you just pop them into Facebook there and we'll try and get to them. So welcome, Claudia.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Okay. So tell us about Europe Street News and what motivated you to start the magazine?
Yes. So I started Europe Street News just after the referendum in 2016, because I thought there were very important information gaps in the mainstream media. So one of them was the lack of focus on what Brexit would mean for people. So all the media reporting, especially around the referendum time, was about the economic aspects of it, the trade and the political debates. So a lot of political spin as well. But very little was said about what this all historical event would mean for the people, for the most affected, but also for people in the future, intending to move in the future. So that was one, probably the most important reason why I started Europe Street News. Then the other gap was about the practical aspect of it. So not only was the information lacking in general, but also what does it mean for me as an EU citizen in the UK or as a British citizen in the EU. There was nowhere where to find consistent information on a regular basis of how the negotiations were evolving, for example. So that was another reason. And the third part is the lack of a European narrative around Brexit. So everything was presented with a very national sort of focus, a very national perspective. And I remember at that time, I was obviously reading the Italian media about it, and also media from other European countries. And you could see that the narrative was completely different. So again, especially if you're a person who has lived across borders, it's very difficult to identify with only one national narrative. And so I thought there should be a place where to bring all these aspects together, what Brexit means for the people, but also what it means from a European perspective and not just one country perspective.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so what does Europe Street News do, say, on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so we do what probably most all the media do. So we monitor the news, what is happening around. So we monitor the news in the UK, obviously, at the EU level in Brussels, and also as much as possible what is happening in the media in the different European countries. And of course, we share a lot of this in social media, mainly on Twitter. Part of it on Instagram, where we target a sort of a different audience, a bit younger maybe. And also we bring all this information together, partly on the website and partly in a newsletter, where to give this European perspective of things. Generally speaking, we try to have in-depth articles, so more sort of analysis where we can bring together the different aspects of, let's say, one issue or one problem. So it's really not about following the day-to-day news stream, but bringing all these news that appear during a week, for example, and bring them together in one, maybe a bit more complex story.
Okay, so you kind of curate it specifically for EU citizens.
It's for EU citizens in the UK, also for British citizens in the EU. I guess it's so. This is the core. This is the core audience for which Europe's Renew started. But in reality, it's meant to be for all the people who move across borders or have interest across borders. And it's quite interesting because in recent months, the audience has increased a lot amongst British citizens who live in the UK because of all the changes that are happening and the new trade agreement and so on. There will be impacts for the future for pretty much everybody who intends to go to the EU or vice versa at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so and how did it say grow into the magazine that it is today? Was it a rapid development or was it kind of gradual? Did you find there was a lot of demand for this type of news?
So it was gradual. There was some quite a lot of interest immediately, and then it was gradual. And then there have been some peaks. So some articles that have gone really viral, and then of course attracted a lot of attention. So there have been peaks in the level of interest. So there is definitely interest for these sort of topics. And as I said, at the moment, the focus is on the Brexit, on the situation created by Brexit. But what we really want to do is to expand and look at the wider free movement issue and EU citizenship and all the rights deriving from that. And so the audience for this sort of news is much bigger, obviously.
Okay, brilliant. That sounds really interesting. It's good that it's kind of grown from, you know, a small website to such a big magazine. And so do you write all articles to yourself, or can anyone contribute, or how do you find contributors for your articles?
So I do quite a lot of articles, and we partner as well with the organization with the specific expertise in this sort of topics. We had, for example, recently a partnership with the Citizens' Rights Project in Scotland to explain how things were working for EU citizens in the UK, and especially children. We work with the European Citizens Action Service, which is one of the main organizations working on the rights of mobile citizens at the EU level in Brussels. So generally speaking, we tend to work with organizations who know these sort of issues in depth. Occasionally we publish articles from people who have had certain experiences in this area and they want to share them. Other times an idea can become more of an interview rather than a self-written sort of article or story. So yes, there is a bit of a variety, but I must say it's not always very easy to get the in-depth knowledge about the EU aspects of citizens' rights. This is not always easy to find.
Okay, I see. Okay, and can you just give us a deep dive into the types of topics that you cover?
So the topics are, so the starting point is EU citizenship and the rights that derive from EU citizenship and what this means in the context of Brexit. So a lot of the coverage now is about issues created by Brexit, what is changing for the people most affected immediately, directly. And then there are some other topics. So just to mention some examples, all the issues related to residence, the settled status in the UK, and the residence schemes in the EU member states. Issues related to healthcare, so all the new health insurance card that can be used across Europe. Issues related to pensions, how do European pensions work for people who have moved across different countries. So this is one aspect. The other is more related to the core rights that are related to EU citizenship. For example, voting rights. This is going to be a big topic in the coming months because, for example, at the EU level, a revision of these rights is planned. So there will be a lot of discussion around them. Another aspect related to citizenship is that always has a lot of interest, is about the countries that don't allow double citizenship. There are few in Europe, and this has created a lot of problem also in the context of Brexit, because many people sought British citizenship in the UK or vice versa in other countries. And there are some countries like the Netherlands, Austria, Spain, that don't allow this. So if you naturalize in one country, you have to give up your original citizenship. So this is another very big topic that is wide open at the European level. In the newsletter, we also try to give a more general sort of context on these issues. So talking a little bit more, briefly about the political news, what is going on in different countries, but always with the view of what this means for citizens' rights. And then, of course, a little bit of maybe travels and, like location to visit, a little bit more the entertaining part. And then, of course, in the last year and a half, we had the unexpected news of the pandemic. This has created a lot of restrictions in terms of free movement across Europe. And of course, this poses a big problem on how to follow this huge story, which is in developments, also with the limited capacity. So this has become a little bit part of Europe Street as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're obviously like really highly complicated, areas of the law that you're handling. Do you find it difficult to kind of break it down into something that, a layperson can understand? Or who are you targeting your articles at? Like, are you targeting articles so that anyone can understand them, or are you targeting them at experts?
So the objective is to write these articles in a way that everybody can understand them. It's not always easy, I must say. It's sometimes articles that require a lot of thinking and a lot of time and a lot of drafting and redrafting. That's also, I must say, as a journalist, that's also a little bit of the fun of it, of making something that is useful for the reader. So the general principle is really who reads the articles is because if they want to read these articles because they have an interest on these issues, so it should be meaningful to them and it should be useful for them. So this is always what's in mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and was there any particular article that you really enjoyed working on, or that you really thought this is going to be really helpful for people?
So the articles that I generally like the most are the ones that come from ideas of readers or from people who come across Europe Street, and then they think, oh, I had a problem on this issue, and maybe they can talk about it. And there have been a few examples. So one, I think it's quite an interesting example, and it really reflects the core of Europe Street. So basically, a person sent an email a while ago saying that he was struggling to update. So he had settled status and he had renewed the passport, and then he was struggling to update the details with the new passport on the settled status platform. So this became a story, and this is now one of the most read articles ever on Europe Street, because it's probably one of the few articles you can find around on how to update your passport details on the settled status scheme. And now that we know the numbers. So at a certain point in time, there are a few million people who will have to go through this process. And yes, and this is honestly, this is not a topic that the mainstream media would be talking about.
Right, so you do have articles on like real life experiences of, you know, people's everyday lives and the problems they're facing.
Yes, yes. Also, similarly, a while ago, we had an article written by a British citizen in Sweden, talking about all the problems of returning to live in the UK with the EU spouses after 2022, because there is now this deadline for returning to the UK under the current EU rules. So this was quite an eye-opener. I personally, I hadn't realized how serious the situation was. And that article got a huge traction as well, because really many people were not aware about it.
Okay. That's really, it's kind of concerning that people are having such problems with the settled status scheme and that. We'll just pop over to social media and just see if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I have one question come in from Jenny, which is about, so this notion of EU citizenship, which kind of isn't really a well-defined thing, legally speaking. And what she's asking is, do you think we could have avoided a lot of the problems that we've had if the notion of EU citizenship had been a well-defined legal thing and a set of rights that were essentially set in stone for people that are unable to be removed or undone as a result of Brexit?
So EU citizenship is defined legally. It's not just a symbol. I mean, the fact that it's mentioned on the passports of citizens of the countries of the European Union, is written European Union, is not just a symbolic thing. There are some rights that come from that. And especially it relates to the more political rights. I mean, there are free movement rights that apply to the members of the single market, but EU citizenship includes, as I said, the more political rights. So this is there is a sort of a legal definition. Then in the treaties, the problem is that in the European treaties, EU citizenship is associated to the citizens of the member states. So the assumption is, if a country is not a member state, then the citizens cannot have EU citizenship. So this is now, this concept is now challenged at the European Court of Justice. There are a few lawsuits that are ongoing, and I think we will find out more in the coming months. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the judges will say about it. But it's a very complex issue, and in a way, I think it's important to have this EU citizenship because we have some common institution as well. So we have the European Parliament that all EU citizens elect. So there is a structure, there is an institutional structure that also generate this more common form of citizenship. It's quite a unique concept. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So I think it's something quite precious, to be honest. And also there is one other aspect related to that is connected with the concept of citizenship. And it's something that we usually don't hear a lot about. So when we discuss free movement, people think of, like, first of all, people think about crossing the border without border checks and so on. So that is just one minimal part of free movement, because free movement is all the rights behind that. So it's the right to work, the right to put together the different pensions, to have healthcare and so on. But what is most important is that in the free movement directive, the key concept is the non-discrimination. So So there is a right to move across the EU countries, and the right not to be discriminated, to be treated equally. And this is a core of the EU citizenship concept as well. And yes, and I think this is very underestimated, because you can have free movement in theory, in the sense that you can be able to move to another country to work or to study or to set up a business or anything. But if you are discriminated, you find the barrier. And we don't have, at least in theory, we don't have this barrier under EU citizenship. So this is very important, and I think it's not been discussed enough. It's not just the free movement, it's the non-discrimination aspects.
Okay, thanks. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really true. We'll have to keep a close eye on those court cases going forward, definitely. Yeah.
Europe Street will do that.
Okay, brilliant. Obviously. And so it seems like an obvious question, but do you think there are huge differences between the issues that are concerning UK citizens in Europe and then EU citizens in the UK, or are they more or less kind of, concerned about the same issues? Are they facing the same challenges?
So there are some issues that are different because they are specific to the different contexts, and some others that are probably similar. So if we look at EU citizens in the UK, I think one of the big issues, so if we look at the broad picture, not at the specific details. So for EU citizens in the UK, I think a big issue is the trust and the uncertainty that the whole Brexit debate has created. Even for people, I think, with settled status. The Windrush scandal has had a big impact in the perception of rights that can be lost. And so I think for a lot of people, there is this is in the back of the mind. So, okay, I have my rights acknowledged, I have settled status, but what is going to happen in 10 years' time? So this is, I think, a very big thing for EU citizens in the UK. Also, there has been a very negative narrative in general. So this hostile environment is a form of hostility that's manifested in many different ways. And so I think a lot of people have felt that. For UK citizens in the EU, maybe there hasn't been this strong hostility, but they're affected by two major changes in terms of rights because these were not recognized in the withdrawal agreement. So British citizens in the EU have lost free movement rights in the rest around the EU. So the rights are recognized in the country where they are living. But this is very problematic, especially for all the people who travel a lot or who have interest in the businesses and so on across borders. And the other aspect is what I was mentioning before, is the time limit on the ability to return to the UK with their family members without having to face the hostile environment policies as well, of like proving a certain level of income, having the visas and pay the healthcare surcharge. So this, it's very hard when there is a time limit on life events. So I think those two issues for them are really, really, are really hard to handle. And if we look at more generally what I think is affecting both groups in the same way, is maybe sort of issues of identity. Obviously, these sort of situations, it's hard to say. It's hard to say there is a general trend, or everybody lives these sort of events in different ways. But I think what's in common is also partly related to what I was saying before. So free movement has created a space where people could move across countries with this sort of sense of equality. And the fact of going through the settled status in the UK or the new schemes in the EU countries somehow put people in this sort of other category where you have to prove you have the right to stay. So I think in that everybody is affected more or less in similar ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's clearly, worrying time for lots of people. And so just in terms of that, obviously, like other EU countries are watching what's happening in the UK. So do you think in general across the EU that Brexit has increased or decreased support for the EU as a concept?
So in general, when we look at the polls, the support for the EU has increased since Brexit. So there has been, of course, it's been, the major events around Brexit have been reported in the media, but it's not a topic that is as consuming as in the UK. And depending on the situations, maybe looked at with a little bit of curiosity as well. So it's not perceived in the same sort of way. I think, generally speaking, the perception of the UK has traditionally been of a very well-organized, rational, efficient, like strong country. And this whole debate has thrown a new light, in a way, on the perception people had. And so I think there are a lot of questions of like what is going on, but also looking at all the difficulties. I think people are just thinking, do we want to go through this? Maybe not. So there is this. I think it has strengthened in a way the unity of the European, of the EU countries. And also another thing that is very important, we look at Brexit, but also Brexit is happening in a context that keeps evolving. And now we have this situation, we have the pandemic. And last year, the EU countries have agreed these big recovery plans with some common debts. And these are historical decisions for the level of integration that they bring to at the EU level. So on one end, there is Brexit, but on the other hand, things have moved on. So even the EU that was in 2016, it's different now. So the integration has evolved as well. And so it's very different to put those things together. Sorry, I lost it.
That's okay, don't worry. Okay, and so we'll just pop over to social media and see if there's any more questions there.
So I have a question from Bill. This is a slightly complicated one, really, but it's asking about this notion of citizenship and being an EU citizen, and obviously being a citizen of a nation. There's sort of two sides to it. One is a set of rights, but there's also a sort of notion of some kind of responsibility, I guess, towards that nation. Whereas, and so his question's about how does that work when we're talking about a more kind of abstract notion such as the EU? Do you think in general European people feel some sense of responsibility towards this collective thing? Is that a real thing, do you think? Or could it be?
So maybe there isn't. So yes, in the concept of citizenship, there are rights and also there are duties. So, for example, the duty. I mean, we talked about the rights before. In terms of duties, the duties are to respect the law, pay taxes. In this case, we all contribute, even in a small part, to the EU budget. Voting can be seen as both a right and a duty as well. So there are these elements that go together. The way people perceive the EU and duties towards the EU, I'm I'm not so sure, and I'm also not so sure to which extent this has been studied. So if it's maybe it should be something to do surveys about to better understand. My feeling is that maybe not EU citizenship, but definitely free movement is a concept that has been adopted, let's say, at the EU level. So this idea of moving across countries is something that is now, especially the younger generations, taken completely for granted. Maybe this is dangerous as well, because when you take things for granted, maybe you don't appreciate enough, and then, you know, as we see, you can lose them without even realizing. But there is this sense of like one open area and common territory. So I think there is this, maybe still at an early stage, but there is this sense of a common area and common space with some common rules.
Okay,
thanks.
Speaking of responsibility, what is your view of the situation in Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Protocol, and, you know, both sides threatening to breach it?
So this is probably the most difficult part to handle with Brexit, because there isn't a clear solution. I mean, Brexit has created a sort of a border. So the problem is how to handle this border and where to place it and to which extent it should be or not be visible. So the problem, I think, is that there is a willingness to solve this issue, at least from the EU level, in a certain way. But the more flexibility that is required, the more trust between the parties is needed. And at the moment, trust is quite low. So this is the difficult part. I mean, you can have all sorts of conventional informal agreement and say like, okay, let's not look too much at this detail and, you know, let's forget that other one. But those things you can do when there is a lot of trust between the parties. And here we have one party that is started to call for like a total review of like, and say not respecting the protocol just months after it was signed. So it's very difficult, I think, to establish that level of trust that would allow all the flexibilities that is needed behind. So that is one thing. The other part, I think, that is very interesting with the issue of the border in Northern Ireland is again related to EU citizenship, because so what is the position of people living in Northern Ireland who identify as Irish and Northern Irish? So in a way, they will have more rights than British citizens, because they could still have the EU citizenship, but they will have less rights than EU citizens. So this is a very interesting position. And again, it's another area that I'm not sure it has been studied in its full depth. Maybe there are even solutions in there, looking more at those aspects of what are the rights of the people. I just can't say, but I think there is something to look in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it requires a lot more study and thought on that issue, definitely. So almost running out of time. Just wondering, how do you see your website developing in the future? Are you going to keep it going, or?
Yes.
Yeah, this is a long-term project, isn't it?
It's a long-term project, and also in a way, as I said, it started out of an emergency. We can call it that way, of like millions of people losing in a way or another some of their rights. But across the EU, people who move across borders are not necessarily aware or fully aware of their rights, and those rights who are maybe at risk. And as I said, maybe some rights are taken too much for granted. So, so at the moment, the coverage is a lot about Brexit and a little bit on the EU side. So I think in the long term, the idea will be more reverted. So to have more on the EU side of things, and hopefully if things calm down, a little bit less on Brexit, with the hope that, you know, you don't need to talk a lot about certain things because the problem sort of gets resolved over time.
Yeah, well, we all hope that happens. Yeah, we'll just see if there's any more questions from social media. We'll just maybe take one more question.
No more. That's it.
No more. Okay, no worries. Well, thank you so much for talking to us, and you know, thanks so much for running that website. It's such an invaluable, you know, source of information and support for everybody during these really worrying times.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation, and also for all the support to Europe Street.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you.